Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. Eli pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the auction hall, breath fogging the surface as he stared into the hangar-sized chamber beyond. He was 18, barely a man in the eyes of the world, legally allowed to pilot civilian craft, still too young to rent half the apartments in the city, and yet this moment felt bigger than adulthood. It felt like destiny tugging the sleeve of a kid who had no business standing here. The air inside the hall smelled like scorched metal, oil, and regret. Rows upon rows of decommissioned spacecraft, fighters, freighters, survey pods, forgotten experiments rested like sleeping beasts under the flickering industrial lights. Some were polished, others were barely holding themselves together with rust and prayer. Most carried price tags higher than he could dream of. But none of that mattered. Eli didn't come here to choose. He came here to find something, though he didn't know what until he saw it. At the far end of the hall sat a starfighter so unremarkable that most bidders brushed past without slowing. Its hull was dull gray, scarred with old burn marks and patched plates. A long gash across the left wing looked like someone had dragged a plasma cutter across it. Its thrusters were outdated, its wings disproportional by modern standards, and its registry number, Z57, was barely visible beneath layers of grime. It looked like trash, yet Eli couldn't pull his gaze away. He didn't know why, but something about the fighter felt awake, like an abandoned dog at a shelter locking eyes with the one person who would take it home. His chest tightened with a sensation so sharp and unexpected, he almost stepped back. A rough voice broke his trance. "You're looking at that one?" A maintenance worker muttered beside him. The old man's beard was the same color and texture as steel wool. His uniform had the faded emblem of the local spaceport, along with grease stains that no amount of scrubbing would ever remove. He squinted at the Z57 and shook his head. "Boy, if you're smart, you walk away from that thing." Eli blinked. "Why?" The man hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the fighter, then back at Eli. "Some ships," he said slowly, "are decommissioned for a reason that ain't written on the paperwork." Then he walked off without explaining. Eli stared after him, unsettled but even more intrigued. Something deep inside him twisted, a whisper of curiosity. A pull he couldn't ignore. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the hall. "Next up, Starfighter Model Z57, decommissioned, minimal functionality, hull damage moderate to severe. Starting bid, 20,000 credits." Most of the crowd didn't even bother approaching. A few laughed. A man in a business suit muttered, "Should have scrapped it instead," earning chuckles from his companions. But Eli stepped forward. His palms were sweaty, his stomach a knot. He had worked for years, tutoring kids, hauling cargo at the docks, patching maintenance panels in the lower city, to gather exactly 21,000 credits, every bit of savings he had. No backup plan, no safety net. He told himself he was stupid. He told himself this was reckless. But he raised his hand anyway. 21, he shouted. Heads turned. Snickers rose. Someone whispered, "Kid's gonna regret that." The auctioneer paused, scanning the room for higher bids. "Do I hear 22? Anyone? Going once? Going twice?" Eli held his breath so long his eyes stung. "Please," he thought, "please let this be the right choice." The gavel slammed. "Sold! To the young man in the front." Eli's heartbeat erupted like fireworks. He had done it. He actually owned a starfighter. It took 2 full days, 3 favors from neighbors, a rented tow drone, and every ounce of his optimism to drag the Z57 back to his tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city. Technically, it wasn't an apartment anymore. It was a converted warehouse unit with a barely functional bedroom corner. But it had a garage door and a platform big enough for a small ship. That was all Eli ever needed. As the battered fighter was lowered into his garage, neighbors gathered like spectators watching someone adopt a dead dinosaur. A kid yelled, "It's gonna explode!" An old lady muttered, "He wasted money." Someone else laughed openly. Eli ignored every one of them. He stepped into the dim light of his garage and stared at the Z-57, now resting like a wounded creature in a makeshift sanctuary. The metal hull caught the faint glow of a single overhead lamp, giving it a ghostly sheen. Despite its dents and scars, the ship had a strange dignity, like a warrior aged by time rather than defeat. He approached slowly, running his fingers along the cold metal. The surface was rough, uneven, dotted with old burn scars, yet he felt something. A quiet hum beneath the touch, as if the ship's heart were beating faintly in its sleep. "Hey," he whispered, feeling foolish. "I'm Eli. I guess I'm your new owner." For just a moment, he thought he felt the metal warm under his fingertips. He shook the thought away. He was tired, probably imagining things. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the fighter again. The way it sat at the auction, abandoned. The way it felt like it was waiting for him. And the old technician's warning echoed in his brain. Some ships are decommissioned for a reason. By midnight, he was sitting cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, staring at the ship in silence. The garage was barely lit by a flickering bulb. Outside, the city buzzed softly with distant traffic and life. Inside, his world felt paused. Eli exhaled. "What are you hiding?" he whispered. Then it happened. A sound, soft, almost imperceptible, like a sigh leaking from deep inside the hull. Eli froze. Another sound followed, a faint, rhythmic vibration. The ship's metal plates shifted ever so slightly, as though something inside was adjusting after a long sleep. Eli's breath caught. The Z-57 was breathing. He stood slowly, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at him to run. But curiosity held him still, stronger than fear, stronger than common sense. His voice trembled. "Hello?" No reply. Just that same faint, rhythmic hum, steady, patient, alive. Eli swallowed hard. He didn't know what he had bought. He didn't know why the ship felt like it was watching him from behind cold metal eyes. But he knew one thing for certain. This was no ordinary fighter, and whatever had awakened inside it had been asleep for a very, very long time. The hum did not stop. By the next night, it had evolved into something unmistakable, rhythmic, melodic, almost like a distant lullaby trapped inside metal bones. Eli sat in front of the Z-57 with a cup of reheated tea that had long gone cold, staring at the ship as if it might suddenly grow eyes and look back at him. A normal person would have called the authorities, or a repair service, or at least a friend. Eli had none of those options. He only had his curiosity, sharpened to a dangerous edge. "Okay," he whispered, voice trembling. "If you're alive, or haunted, or just defective, show me something." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the cockpit canopy flickered with a faint pulse of blue light. Eli stood so Fee hit the edge of a toolbox. He winced, but didn't look away. The glow intensified, filling the seams around the canopy like veins beneath skin, thin threads of electric blue luminescence tracing elegant patterns he had never seen before. The Z-57 let out another hum, stronger this time. The coils beneath the hull vibrated. Stray dust rose from the floor. Then the cockpit opened. Not with the grinding resistance of old hydraulics, but with a smooth, silent glide, like a breath finally released after centuries of holding still. A cold, blue light spilled out. Eli swallowed. This is not standard tech. His feet moved before he could question them. Slowly, he climbed the ladder and leaned into the cockpit. What he saw made his breath evaporate. A holographic star map hovered in midair, projected by the ship's dormant console. Thousands of tiny white lights, stars, swirled and realigned into unfamiliar formations. Some pulsed slowly, steady as heartbeats. Others shimmered with trails of softly glowing symbols, none matching any language Eli knew. "This isn't human," he whispered. The hologram shifted. a spiral of constellations folded inward like a blooming flower. A central star glowed brightest, its orbiting planets rotating in slow, graceful arcs. Then a voice, soft as velvet and ancient as the void, filled the cockpit. "Welcome, traveler." Eli jolted backward so hard he nearly fell off the ladder. Hello?" His voice cracked embarrassingly. The voice continued, serene and melodic, almost soothing. "I have been waiting." Eli stared at the hologram, at the shifting lights in alien symbols. "For me? You purchased this vessel. You touched the hull. You called, and I awakened." "That's not what I meant," Eli protested. "I mean, how do you know my name?" "I have listened." He froze. "Listened? To what?" "To the sound you make when you think, when you hesitate, when you hope." The voice softened further. "Your species expresses much in silence." Eli's skin prickled. A chill raced up his spine, not from fear, but from something deeper, a sense that he was in the presence of something older than human memory. "Who or what are you?" he whispered. Instead of answering directly, the hologram shifted again. The central star dissolved into a rotating cube etched with intricate glowing lines. Each line pulsed with faint luminescence, forming symbols that rearrange themselves every few seconds. "I am the last echo of a civilization long gone," the voice said. "My creators traveled the stars, seeking knowledge beyond the horizon of existence." Eli's heart hammered. "A lost civilization," the voice hummed. "Yes, they were known as the Athari." The name tasted foreign on his tongue. Fragile, ancient, sacred. The hologram expanded outward, projecting scenes that seemed more like memories than images. Floating cities shaped like crystalline crescents. Glimmering ships gliding through nebula. Graceful, elongated figures interacting with holograms of intricate design. Eli watched in awe. They built great libraries, preserved wisdom in crystalline cores, and traveled farther than any species before them. "Then what happened?" Eli whispered. "Where did they go?" The voice dimmed. "They left, to seek beyond what could be understood." Left, or vanished, Eli thought. He wanted to ask more, but the cockpit interrupted him with a metallic click. A small compartment opened near the co-pilot's seat. Inside lay a metallic box, about the size of a book, covered in intricate silver etchings that glowed faintly, like they were remembering how to shine. Eli reached for it with trembling fingers. The moment he touched the surface, a warm hum resonated through the ship. The texture of the metal felt impossibly smooth, almost elastic under his skin, like touching solidified starlight. The voice spoke gently. "You have found the memory vessel." Eli blinked. "This? It's just a box." "Not a box," the ship corrected. "A message, encoded in a language of thought and emotion." "What does it say?" he asked. "You will understand," the voice replied, "when you are ready." The hum grew stronger, vibrating the cockpit floor. Eli clutched the vessel tighter. Then visions exploded behind his eyes. He saw towering spires rising from oceans of light, machines that moved without engines, as if obeying the will of the air itself. Beings of shimmering elegance standing atop floating platforms, gazing at stars with longing. Then, darkness, silent cities, empty halls. A final message whispered into the void. "Seek the stars, share knowledge, protect life." Eli stumbled backward, clutching the edge of the cockpit. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His breath came in sharp bursts. What was that?" he gasped. "A fragment," the voice said softly. "The first of many." Eli stared at the memory vessel. For the first time in his life, he felt genuinely small, not insignificant, but awestruck by the immensity of the universe. A tiny flicker of excitement ignited in his chest, battling fear. "What do I do now?" he whispered. "All that is required," the ship replied, "is curiosity and courage." Eli let out a shaky laugh. "Courage? I'm just a kid." "Yet you are here," the ship said, "and that is enough." He looked around the cockpit, the alien symbols, The glowing maps, the strange sense of presence filling every corner. "Is this why they made you?" he asked. "To find someone? To pass this on?" "Yes," the voice answered. "My purpose is to guide, but only one with an open mind may unlock what remains." Eli swallowed hard. "So what now?" A new hologram flickered to life, a grid of stars. One star pulsed brighter than all the others. "This is your first waypoint," the voice said. "A place where knowledge sleeps, waiting." "You want me to go there?" Eli whispered. "No," the ship corrected. "The Athari hoped you would choose to." Eli stared at the glowing star, heartbeat thundering in his chest. He had never flown a real ship. Only simulators. Only dreams. Yet something inside him said this was right. He set the memory vessel gently on the seat, brushing his fingers over the alien patterns once more. Then he whispered, "Okay, let's see where this leads." The ship hummed, a sound like relief, excitement, and ancient patience woven together. "Traveler," it said, "your journey begins." And the cockpit lights flared alive, as if awakening from 1,000-year sleep. Morning light crept through the cracks of the garage door, painting thin, golden stripes across the battered hull of the Z-57. Eli stood beside the ship with a wrench in one hand, the memory vessel in the other, and a nervous energy pulsing through his veins. The excitement from last night hadn't faded. If anything, it had fermented into something stronger. An intoxicating cocktail of wonder and terror. The ship's cockpit flickered awake the instant he stepped forward, its panels glowing like welcoming eyes. Unlike any craft he'd ever seen, the Z-57 reacted to his presence. It didn't require manual activation or a power switch. It simply knew. "Good morning," the soft Atari voice murmured. "Your thoughts are clearer today." Eli froze mid-step. "You can tell what I'm thinking?" "Not thoughts," the ship corrected. "Patterns, emotions, fragments of intention." He exhaled shakily. "Right, no pressure." The ship hummed a gentle, amused note. Over the next hour, Eli learned that the Z-57 wasn't just advanced, it was adaptive. The control panels glowed brighter when he felt confident, dimmer when he hesitated. Certain symbols reshaped themselves when Eli hovered his hand over them, realigning to match the pathways of his thoughts. The cockpit seemed almost alive, flexing and adjusting to his presence. It unnerved him, but it also fascinated him. He spent the morning taking notes in his battered notebook. Sketches of symbols, attempts at transcribing the humming patterns, even small diagrams of the ship's internal structure. Some markings traced constellations he recognized. Others aligned with star clusters he had only ever seen in deep survey charts. But most were entirely alien, beautiful, mathematical, terrifying in their complexity. Hours passed in a blur. Eli barely noticed the sun shifting across the sky outside. Every time he completed a scribble, a new idea sparked. The Athari language wasn't just a language, it was a thought system. A logic that folded into itself like fractal patterns. And the Z-57 seemed to respond to his attempts at understanding, as though rewarding him for trying. "Traveler," the ship's voice said softly, "you have an affinity for patterns." Eli blinked. "I just see them, I guess. Many before you did not." He paused. "Wait, many?" The cockpit dimmed slightly. "Yes," the ship said. "There were others." Eli's heart hammered. Others? Humans? Not only humans, other species, other minds. A long pause. None reached the first waypoint. The room felt colder. "What happened to them?" he whispered. "The trials are not cruel," the ship said gently, "but they demand clarity of mind and intention. Most travelers lost their path." "Lost," Eli repeated, "as in died?" Silence. Eli looked down at his trembling hands. The weight of the memory vessel in his palm suddenly felt heavier. He had bought this ship thinking it was a project, a toy, an escape from his boring life. Now it felt like he had stepped into someone else's fate, into an ancient test designed for the worthy and the unworthy. He tried to push the thought aside, but it clung to him like a shadow. By afternoon, Eli had done as much preparation as he could. He checked every panel, every cable, every hydraulic hinge. Not that it mattered. The ship's systems were self-regulating and far beyond anything he could understand. But the act of checking grounded him. It made him feel like he belonged here, even though his hands still shook. He stepped to the center of the cockpit and placed the memory vessel back into its compartment. The vessel pulsed faintly, as if acknowledging his return. "Ship," Eli said, steadying his voice. "Show me the waypoint again." A holographic starfield burst into view, swirling until it settled on a grid of stars. One point pulsed brighter and brighter until the entire cockpit glowed with its light. "That is your destination," the ship said. "The first archive." "How far is it?" "Farther than your kind has mapped, but within reach." Eli took a deep breath. "And what will I find there?" "Knowledge," the ship said simply, "and the beginning of understanding." He hesitated. "In danger?" The ship paused before answering. "All journeys contain risk." A beat. "But you are suited for this path." Eli swallowed hard. "Okay, then let's go." The cockpit brightened in approval. The takeoff was scheduled at dawn, when the city spaceport was quietest. Eli rolled the Z-57 onto the landing pad under the pale glow of morning. His hands shook. Sweat gathered at his brow. His heart thudded so loudly he could hear it echo inside his helmet. "You are afraid," the ship observed calmly. "Of course I'm afraid," Eli muttered. "This is insane." "Fear," the ship replied, "is simply the mind acknowledging possibility." Pretty philosophical for a machine, I learned from philosophers. The engines warmed with a low, vibrating hum. Eli's breath hitched. "Are you ready, traveler?" He wasn't, but he nodded anyway. The Z-57 lifted from the platform with a smooth, effortless grace, rising through the docking bay's shield barrier. The city fell away beneath them, a sprawling patchwork of rooftops, neon signs, and drifting transport drones. Then the sky opened. Eli let out a small gasp as the fighter broke upward through the final layer of atmosphere. Blue faded to violet, violet to black. Stars burst into view like scattered diamonds across a velvet canvas. "This is..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Beautiful," the ship said for him. "Yes." The fighter accelerated, thrusters whispering through the dark as it locked onto the waypoint star. The holographic navigation lines shimmered across Eli's field of view, guiding him through a narrow corridor of space where human ships had rarely traveled. Eli stared into the void. He had dreamed of this all his life, flying beyond everything he'd ever known. But reality was heavier, fuller, sacred somehow. The ship hummed again. "Traveler," it said, "prepare yourself. We approach the threshold." Eli tightened his grip on the controls. "What threshold?" Before the ship could answer, space seemed to fold around them. Stars stretched into long, bending lines, like melted threads of light. The cockpit trembled with a sensation that wasn't motion, wasn't gravity, but something deeper, a shift in the universe itself. Eli yelled, "What's happening?" "Transition," the ship replied calmly. "Do not fear." The fighter glowed with shimmering patterns, the same fractal symbols that adorn the memory vessel. Eli watched as the stars twisted inward, forming a tunnel of spiraling radiance. Then, with a soft pop, the world snapped back into stillness. Eli gasped for air. Outside the window lay a star system he had never seen. The sun was pale blue, its light casting a cold, ethereal glow across the void. A massive structure floated in orbit around the third planet, a station of shimmering white metal, covered in glowing lines like living veins. It wasn't human. "Behold," the ship whispered, "the first archive." Eli stared, jaw slack. "It's alive." "In some ways. Can we dock?" "We must." The fighter glided toward the station like a bird returning to a nest it hadn't seen in ages. As they approached, the structure's surface shifted, the glowing lines realigning to form a docking pattern. A soft magnetic pull guided the ship into a circular bay that lit up the moment the Z-57 crossed its threshold. The hangar doors sealed shut behind them with a gentle hum. Eli unstrapped himself and hesitated at the cockpit opening. "Is it safe?" The ship paused. "This place was built to test. Safety depends on your clarity." "Super reassuring," Eli muttered. He climbed down and stepped onto the station's floor. The ground was smooth, slightly warm, and pulsed faintly beneath his boots. As he walked forward, lights awakened along the walls, spiraling symbols dancing in synchronized patterns, inviting him deeper. Eli took a deep breath. He had no idea what awaited him, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not the first to reach this place. He was only the first to still be alive. The hallway beyond the docking bay felt like stepping into the rib cage of a sleeping giant. The walls curved organically, each surface glowing with veins of soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Slow, ancient, alive. Eli walked cautiously, boots echoing faintly against the smooth crystalline floor. The air was cool and carried a faint, sweet scent he couldn't place, like memory trapped in fragrance. "Ship?" he whispered into the small comm device the Z-57 had synchronized with his suit. "You reading this?" "I am here," the ship replied, its voice calmer than Eli's nerves. "But my interaction is limited. The core trials restrict external guidance." "Trials," Eli repeated, the words sticking uncomfortably in his throat. "You mean tests?" "Yes. And if I fail?" The voice paused. "Then the archive will close. You will not be harmed." Eli didn't believe that. The slight tremor in the ship's tone made doubt crawl across his skin. He stepped into the first chamber. The room was circular, vast, with a ceiling so high it vanished into shimmering darkness. The walls were covered in swirling glyphs that rearranged themselves every few seconds, as though the room were thinking. A single pedestal rose in the center, holding a crystalline orb glowing with shifting colors. A soft voice, not the ship's, filled the room. Trial 1, Logic of Light. The orb's glow intensified, projecting beams that formed a complex lattice of shapes and reflections across the room. Symbols floated midair like fragile glass petals. Eli swallowed. "Okay. Start with observation." He studied the beams, noticing the angles, the repeating fractal patterns. Each symbol responded when he moved, pulsing faintly as though waiting for him to choose. It reminded him of solving holographic puzzles in cheap simulators, except those wouldn't kill him. He reached for one symbol. It glowed brighter. Another symbol dimmed. The entire lattice shifted in response. It took nearly an hour for Eli to piece together the pattern. The beams had to be redirected through specific symbols based on the Athari numeric sequences he had sketched earlier. He adjusted each symbol carefully, sweat dripping down his neck, until the final beam hit the pedestal. The orb flashed. A warm gust of air swept through the chamber. Trial 1 passed. Eli collapsed on one knee. "That was insane." "You processed it effectively," the ship said through the comm. "Your mind adapts quickly." "That's not helping," Eli muttered, pushing himself up. The chamber door behind the pedestal slid open, revealing a long corridor lined with crystalline panels, shimmering like starlight. Eli stepped through to the next trial. The second chamber was darker, vast like a cathedral, but the air was colder, sharper. The walls were reflective and curved into odd shapes, creating a labyrinth of shifting shadows. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the door sealed shut behind him. "Ship?" Eli whispered. No response. A whisper echoed through the chamber instead. Trial 2, Labyrinth of Thought. Mist rose from the floor, turning the reflections into ghostly illusions. Paths extended in dozens of directions. Some were mirrors, some were real. All were deceptive. Eli walked forward carefully, touching each surface. Some passed through his fingers like holograms. Others felt solid. But he quickly realized the reflections didn't mirror him. They showed versions of him slightly wrong. One reflection showed him older. One showed him frightened. One showed him triumphant. One showed him dead. Eli's breath hitched. What is this? Whispers crawled through the air, multiplying, layering over one another. Fear is illusion. Intention guides path. Truth lies inward. Eli closed his eyes, inhaling shakily. Okay, he murmured. Then intuition. He stepped forward, not trusting his sight, but his feeling. One path felt cold. One felt hollow. One felt warm, like a quiet pulse calling him. He followed the warmth. The mist thickened, surrounding him like ghostly fingers. The voices grew louder. At one point, he tripped and nearly slammed into a mirrored wall that flashed his deepest insecurities back at him. His childhood failures, moments of shame, memories of being mocked for dreaming too big. He clenched his fists. This is not real, and you don't get to decide who I am. The warmth intensified when he rejected the illusion. After what felt like hours, the mist parted, revealing an exit glowing with golden light. Eli stepped through. Trial 2 passed. He didn't celebrate. He was too shaken. Eli stepped through the doorway, still trembling from the final trial, expecting another chamber, another puzzle, another illusion, another test of intellect or heart. But what opened before him was nothing like the rooms he had endured. It was a vast atrium, so immense the ceiling disappeared into a sky of swirling stardust. The floor beneath him resembled polished obsidian, yet it rippled like liquid light when he stepped on it. The walls were shaped like the inner surface of a colossal sphere, every inch carved with glyphs that pulsed softly, breathing in ancient rhythm. At the center of the chamber floated a crystalline spire. It levitated above a circular platform, rotating slowly, emitting a warmth that seemed to reach into Eli's bones. He felt something stir deep within him, a pull not unlike the one he felt the first time he saw the Z-57 at the auction. Ship, he whispered into his comm. What is this place? The ship's reply crackled, its signal weaker than before. This is the Heart Vault, the final repository of Athari knowledge. I am restricted. I cannot enter. Why not? Only the traveler may proceed. A pause. Eli, be careful. The way the ship said his name made his skin tingle, as if it feared something here, as if the place itself could swallow him. He took a shaky step forward. The Heart Vault responded instantly. Light streamed across the platform like rivers of starlight. The floating spire brightened, its facets reflecting scenes from long-dead suns. A deep hum vibrated through the air, a resonance that made the hair on his arms rise. Then the air shifted. A figure emerged from the spire as though carved from the crystal itself, tall, elegant, luminous. Its form shimmered like a hologram, but its presence felt solid, heavy, ancient. It had no face, yet Eli could feel its attention on him, like a warm hand resting gently on his shoulder. Welcome, traveler. The voice was not the ship's. This one was deeper, richer, layered with an emotion Eli couldn't place. Sorrow, perhaps, or nostalgia. Eli swallowed hard. You're Athari? A memory, the figure said. A preserved consciousness. A remnant to guide the one who reaches this place. Eli's breath faltered. Why me? Why a human? The figure drifted closer, its form shimmering with tiny fragments of light. Because your kind carries what ours nearly lost. It extended a hand. A swirl of symbols formed between them, glowing lines representing curiosity, empathy, creativity, persistence. They danced like fireflies. Your species, the Athari memory continued, possesses traits rare in the universe. Many civilizations grew powerful. Few grew compassionate. Many advanced. Few questioned their purpose. Humanity is unique. Eli shook his head slowly. We're flawed. And that, the figure said, makes you capable of growth. Images erupted around them, entire galaxies projected in light, starships slicing through nebulas, Athari traveling through shimmering wormholes, worlds of crystal forests, oceans that sang, cities made of floating fractal architecture. Eli stared, awestruck. They were beautiful, he whispered. We were, the figure corrected softly. But beauty can become stagnant. We reached a point where learning slowed. Curiosity faded. We turned inward, and knowledge dimmed. Why? We forgot what youth felt like. Wonder, imperfection, risk. Memories flashed, an entire species walking into the stars like elders leaving home for the last time. So you left, Eli said. Yes, the Athari replied. We ventured beyond mapped reality, seeking rebirth. But we did not wish our wisdom to die. We seeded the galaxy with trials, knowledge, and echoes of ourselves. And you left this ship? Yes, one of many. Each meant to find those who embody the qualities we cherished. Eli felt a lump form in his throat. And you chose humans? We chose potential, and your species carries it well. The spire pulsed, as if agreeing. The air thumbed with an ancient heartbeat. Why tests? Eli asked. Why trials so difficult they killed people? They were not meant to kill, the Athari said quietly. But knowledge without understanding destroys. The trials filter, not the strong or the brilliant, but the open-hearted. And the ones who didn't make it learned lessons even in failure, the Athari said gently. None were lost in vain. Eli exhaled shakily, absorbing that. The figure extended its hand again. Approach the core. Eli stepped onto the circular platform. The crystalline spire unfolded like a blooming flower, its petals made of living light. At the center floated a new crystalline device, larger, brighter, more complex than the memory vessel he found on the Z-57. Its glow was warm, almost comforting. This, the Athari memory said, is the crystalline core, the sum of our civilization's knowledge, art, science, philosophy, everything we were, and everything we hoped another might become. Eli reached out but stopped inches away. Why give this to me? I'm not special. You are, the memory said, not because you were chosen. It leaned closer. But because you chose us. The words hit him like a physical blow. He reached forward. The instant his fingers touched the core, light detonated around him. Eli cried out as stars poured into his mind. Thousands, millions, burning trails of light, patterns of gravity, equations that danced like music. He saw Athari cities rising from oceans of mist, their towers glowing like enormous lanterns. He felt their joy when they discovered new worlds, their grief when they realized wonder had begun to fade, their determination to pass knowledge onward. He saw children learning to manipulate gravity like clay. He saw elders singing songs that shaped water into living sculptures. He saw the final council deciding to leave their galaxy behind. You will carry this, the final voice whispered in his head. Not as a burden, but as a seed. Let your species grow. Let them learn. Let them dream. The vision faded. Eli fell to his knees, gasping. The Athari memory placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You did not just receive knowledge, it said softly. You became part of our story. He looked up, tears streaking down his face. Thank you, he whispered. A sudden tremor ran through the vault. Eli froze. What was that? The Athari figure's glow flickered. The awakening has sent ripples, it said grimly. Something ancient may have felt the disturbance. Eli's blood ran cold. What kind of something? A shadow that once followed us. Not a creature, but a hunger, a presence, a silence that devours meaning. Eli swallowed. And it's coming? Not yet, the Athari replied, though its flicker said otherwise. But caution is required. The vault trembled again, an ominous shudder. The Athari memory pressed the crystalline core into Eli's hands. You must go. Now. What about you? I am only a remnant. My purpose is fulfilled. The figure stepped back, glowing brightly. I believe in your kind, Eli. He trembled. You know my name? We knew it the moment you touched the ship. The spire began to fold, collapsing into itself like a dying star. Hurry, the memory whispered, before the silence wakes. Eli clutched the core to his chest and sprinted toward the exit, the vault trembling violently behind him. As he ran, the last echo of the Athari whispered, Go, traveler, carry our hope. And then the vault sealed, leaving the ancient chamber to flicker into darkness once more. The corridor outside the heart vault shook as Eli sprinted through it, clutching the crystalline core against his chest. The soft glow of the Athari artifact pulsed in sync with his racing heart. The station's lights flickered, the once calm glyphs on the walls jittering with frantic energy. Something in the depths of the archive had awakened, a tremor of cosmic consequence. Ship, Eli gasped into the comm. I'm coming back. The Z-57's voice buzzed sharply into his ear, unsteady and strained. Eli, the station is destabilizing. The vault has shut itself. The pathway is collapsing. Then open the dock. The archive restricts me. Wait, a route is forming. Hurry. Eli didn't need to be told twice. The walls behind him began to tremble, fragments of crystalline dust falling in glittering cascades. Not destructive, more like the archive was closing, folding back into hibernation as quickly as it had awakened. He burst into the docking chamber just as the last crystalline bridge formed beneath his boots, guiding him toward the Z-57. The ship's cockpit opened like a desperate gasp for air. Eli jumped inside, the canopy sealed. Without waiting, he shouted, Go, now! The Z-57 didn't answer in words. It moved. The fighters shot from the dock as the station's inner rings twisted and folded, swallowing themselves like an ancient beast rolling back into slumber. Light collapsed inward. Pathways vanished behind them. The shimmering veins across the station dimmed, darkening section by section. The Z-57 accelerated, engines glowing with Atari brilliance, pushing the ship through the final archway just as it sealed shut. Silence swallowed them. The station floated peacefully once more, calm, still, and quiet, as though nothing had ever happened. Eli sagged in his seat, gasping for breath. Sweat dripped down his temples. His hands trembled violently as the core pulsed against his chest with warm reassurance. The ship's voice softened. You did well, traveler. He let out a shaky laugh. I almost died. Yes, the ship replied, but you lived, and you learned. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Let's go home. The journey back to Earth felt longer, heavier. Eli stared out at the starfield, his mind replaying everything. The trials, the illusions, the Athari memory, the warning, the final words whispered into the vault, a seed, a legacy, a responsibility. The return jump released them near the outer orbit of Earth. Traffic lanes glimmered faintly below, orbital ferries, mining shuttles, corporate transports, all ignorant of the relic drifting into their system, carrying the knowledge of a vanished civilization. The familiar hum of the Z-57 wrapped around Eli like a blanket. You are quiet, the ship observed gently. I'm thinking, Eli murmured. About the core. About everything, Eli whispered. Why me? Why us? What if humanity screws this up? Then humanity will learn, the ship said simply. Growth is not linear. It is iterative. That's comforting. It is truth. Eli smiled faintly. The ship descended through the atmosphere, gliding smoothly toward the city spaceport. Dawn was breaking, painting gold and rose streaks across the sky. The fighter blended easily among older models, its unassuming frame hiding the alien brilliance humming beneath its panels. People stared as the canopy opened, and Eli stepped out with the shimmering, crystalline core in his hands. Some eyed the ship curiously. Others recognized the strange glow of the artifact and gasped. By the afternoon, the demonstration hall was packed. Scientists, engineers, students, politicians, and everyday citizens who had followed the rumors of the strange boy with the ancient starship. Eli set the core gently on a pedestal, the artifact illuminating the entire room with soft, living light. The air shifted, silent, reverent, as the holographic networks awakened, projecting scenes of Athari worlds, philosophies, technologies, and ideas. Eli stood before the crowd with a steadiness he didn't feel. "What you're seeing," he began, voice carrying through the hall, "is the legacy of a civilization that lived long before humans ever reached the stars." He gestured to the holograms, their floating cities, their crystalline libraries, their luminous beings of thought and grace. "They didn't disappear because they fell," Eli continued. "They left. They sought something beyond understanding. But before they did, they made sure their knowledge wouldn't vanish." He lifted the core. "They left this for us, for humanity." Gasps rippled through the room. Eli's voice grew stronger. "They believed in curiosity, in empathy, in creativity. They believed knowledge should guide, not dominate. And they believed a species like ours could become more." The core pulsed warmly, as if agreeing. Eli breathed deeply. "This isn't a weapon. It's not a shortcut to power. It's a teacher, a seed, and it's our responsibility to protect it, learn from it, and grow from it." Around him, the holograms shifted, depicting Athari lessons in science, gravity manipulation, ethics of exploration, interstellar diplomacy, the art of constructing meaning and identity across millennia. People watched with awe, some with tears in their eyes. The world changed that day. Weeks passed in a blur. Schools integrated Athari principles into their curriculum. Research stations buzzed with breakthroughs fueled by the core's revelations. Philosophers debated the ethics of knowledge. Space agencies planned cautiously to explore beyond mapped horizons, following the ancient trails the Athari left behind. Humanity had been handed a key, and for the first time in centuries, they approached the unknown with wonder instead of fear. As for Eli, he didn't fade into legend. He didn't hide. He didn't cling to fame. He traveled. Sometimes he visited research labs and guided students trying to interpret Athari dialects. Sometimes he flew to remote stations to share the core's lessons. Sometimes he returned to space, tracing new points on the Athari map. One evening, Eli sat alone in the cockpit of the Z-57, orbiting a quiet, blue-green moon. The stars gleamed like endless possibilities. The ship hummed softly, almost affectionately. "You have grown," the ship whispered. Eli smiled faintly. "So have you." "The core radiates strongly. Our next waypoint awakens." He turned his head slowly. "There's another one?" A new point flickered on the holographic star map. Distant, faint, but undeniably alive. The waypoints hadn't ended. His story hadn't ended. Eli breathed deeply, steady and resolved. "I'll follow it," he whispered. "I'll learn. I'll carry it forward. I'll make sure their legacy lives." Outside the cockpit, the stars glimmered like 1,000 open doors. The ship hummed in warm approval. "Traveler," it said, "the universe awaits." Eli nodded, eyes filled with purpose. "Then let's begin."